Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll learn to become a better, more business-savvy designer so you can dominate your competition. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm joined by Evelyn Powers. Evelyn Powers is a strategist and designer for Design Powers, a design company she started in 1996. In 2015, she started a joint venture called Nice Work with a fellow web development colleague, creating branding and WordPress websites for area businesses. She's also co-founder of Awesome Women Entrepreneurs, a national organization of women business owners. And she also co-hosts a weekly live radio show program called Awesome Women Entrepreneurs in Arlington, Virginia, where she interviews fellow women entrepreneurs and influential business leaders. Stay tuned to hear some of our bad client stories, lessons we learned from them, and how to identify red flags. Welcome to the podcast, Evelyn. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Colleen. It's great to be here.
You and I have been doing this a very long time, so we have
Yes, we have.
lots of stories to tell.
Well, I will say I'm pretty fortunate that I don't have too many bad clients. I guess I learn quick.
Right, not anymore, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely right off the bat, when I was a young designer, I remember people tried to rip me off a lot. That was kind of my main problem, but I definitely learned from that.
Right, right. So I thought we would start out by defining what a good client is.
So I think a good client is one who is very, invested and interested in the project. I guess we should say, we'll use a website build as an example, and then one that can follow directions. So, if you kind of put them through their paces a little bit and ask them to fill things out, they fill those things out and they fill them out totally and completely. And then they follow, your very basic instructions, whatever those instructions might be. They keep a schedule, because of course schedules are super important to anything.
Right. How about some things that you watch out for?
I would say, kind of someone who is very, very really invested in the details, almost to the point where it's almost minutia, like right off the bat. That's something that I can tell that it's like, ooh, this could be a red flag. Although, and I do have a little story about that. I do have a client who started out that way, but we were able to work that out through a little bit of therapy. And, and then, maybe a potential client that is super grandiose, like they're like, "Oh, when we launch this website, we're gonna get 100,000 users." And you're like, "What?" Maybe, but probably, doubtful. Or, they just have unrealistic goals. And then, finally, somebody that you think might be making endless tweaks, or is just really, really unsure. So those are kind of like the big things that I look for. But the main one is to seem very interested in what they're doing, follow your basic instructions, and want to follow a schedule. I would say that those are the three big ones. I now for relatively bigger jobs, I require people to do discovery with me. And that's a way to weed out people who don't do those 3 things that I just said. Yeah. So if it's a little job, sometimes you're like, all right, I'll just kind of bang this thing out because I know it's just a one-off, and and I'm actually trying to not have too many of those jobs, but they do pop up, and sometimes you just take them on because you can bang it out pretty quickly. But yeah, so I would say those are the 3 biggies for sure.
On my list, I would say, decisive
Yeah.
and responsive. They don't just ghost after a while, and definitely willing to follow your process, pay on time, not looking for order takers. Of course, that can depend on where you are in your career. Sometimes you just have to take a little bit of those kind of clients, just for the money, but someone that's not, looking for someone to be an order taker. And so they don't just come to you with the solution and they just want you to do it. They want they appreciate your expertise.
Yeah.
And definitely ones that demonstrate respect and say, like, don't stand you up for
Right,
meetings.
right. Punctuality. Yeah.
So I've actually modified my contracts many times over the years as a result of coming across some bad clients and some bad behavior. So one of the things that I did was start asking for money up front
Oh, absolutely.
because I actually got stiffed by people I knew. Yeah.
50, 30, 30 is my policy. So
Yeah.
you get half before you start, and then at, a good milestone that is mutually agreeable, you get the next 30, and then before, it gets launched into the world, you get the final 30. And then there's another thing in the contract where if they ghost for 6 weeks, the contract is null and void. So we're done. And to restart the contract, it's basically like restarting the whole process all over again, and that's what we have in the contract for this is for, again, sizable contracts because you can't if you have people disappearing for 3, 4, 5 weeks, it messes with your entire business.
It does. It really
Yeah,
does.
absolutely, and you just can't have people popping in, "Oh, I'm sorry, such and such," knowing again that we're all human beings and tragic things can happen or, especially lately, environmental things can happen, but, generally, yeah, and then, the other one is the point of contact. This has to be decided upon right away. If it's you're working with an organization, who is the person that is going to be primarily responsible for dealing with the project? And if they're not around, who's the second or the third person?
Did you have something happen specifically that you can think of that was like a big issue?
I do have a client right now where they were the main point person and they were pretty good all through discovery and really all through the build, but now the site is launched. It's kind of a tricky situation because the site is based on this particular person. He's an expert, so you really do need his buy-in, but he travels extensively internationally. He just always has a lot of balls in the air, and he won't follow a schedule. This is going on right now. I've been thinking about, do I even want this client anymore? Because the site's cool and it has a lot of potential, but if he's not going to follow the schedule, it's just not worth my time. And then when I do kind of reach out to him and say, "Hey, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in 8 weeks." It's excuses. So I'm actively trying to figure out if this client is worth it or not. Because I have tried a couple different tactics in terms of trying to get other point people within his organization to take responsibility, and they said they would, and then they do, and then they don't.
Oh,
Yeah, it's an ongoing situation.
I had something happen just like that actually, where the my point of contact was traveling, and it was a
Mhm.
very big name client, and then she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be out of the country, you're gonna have to talk to so and so." It actually ended up turning into 8 different people that
Yeah,
I had to talk to, and nobody was communicating with anybody. It was like the more people involved, the worse it got.
yeah.
I had to educate each of them all over again every single time. I was like, "I'm never working with you again."
Generally, how I've dealt with it, just for the purposes of the podcast, is to charge money. But even that, with this particular client now, he's gone from being someone that was pretty generous to now becoming a cheapskate, and that's when I was like, "Okay, well, if there's no money and you're gonna be a pain in the butt, we got nothing going on here." So,
Right.
um, yeah, and I mean, that's just self-preservation right there. But I do have another, again, this is pretty recent, where It's a company that I've worked with for a long time, 8 or 9 years, and they were always pretty good. They've always had a good point of contact. They actually got a new person in. Right off the bat, he was really, really, really sort of picky about minutia, and I remember thinking, "Oh, this could be a big red flag," but I went ahead and did discovery with him, and that it really kinda what it turned out to be is I think he was just sort of focusing on the minutia because everything was overwhelming and new that he kind of defaulted to things that he knew, but then once he got to know and trust me, that kind of fell away a little bit. So that's actually a good story that I think kinda shows that sometimes what might be a red flag, you can just through communication and good discussions and having them do a little bit of due diligence, it kind of works its way out.
Yes, I found that to be the case sometimes too. Well, I speaking of point of contacts, I had a client once early on in my career and came to me for a logo design and a brochure and he said, "Okay, so let's meet for lunch." And I had a full-time job, but I ended up taking a lunch break to be able to meet him, for this project. And he said to me, "You're going to have to impress my mother." He was at the lunch too.
Right?
He was totally for real, but he ended up he was a jerk, but he ended up threatening me via email because he wanted native files for not for the logo, of course, I would give those,
Right.
but he wanted it for all the other materials that I did, and I'm like, "No, you don't get those. Those aren't included." My lesson learned from that was to always specify the deliverables to say, "This is
Right.
exactly what you're getting." And, like, so then if they're like, "Well, am I gonna get this?" No, if it's not listed, you're not getting it, you know?
Yeah. Well, so then hold on a minute. It turns out that you did impress his mom then.
I guess I did, yeah, to get back to work. I mean, wow, that was, like, a huge red flag, though, but,
Yeah.
that's just weird. It was creepy.
Well, so let's talk about something else that, I think is a huge, huge red flag that I did not ever think about before. And it's not really specifically client based, it's more process based. I don't do RFPs anymore.
I don't either.
I think RFPs are a big red flag. And, so to be kind of helpful to
Red flag process.
yeah, it is the red flag process. Oftentimes you'll read these RFPs and you're like, okay, this person doesn't even know what they're talking
Right,
about or the people that put this together.
right.
And then if it's a lowest bid process, it's kind of like, well, do you really want to get in a situation where you're trying to do work for people that don't really know what the work entails for the lowest price? No, I'm not interested.
The other thing with RFPs too is some people think it's really smart for their organization to go and broadcast them out on their website or send them to the big email groups and lists.
Yeah,
In the past, when I did respond to them, I'd be like, "You have no mention of budget. I'm not even gonna bother." And how many people has this gone to? If they're like, "Oh, it's on our website," I'm like, "So it's maybe gone to 20,000 people, so my odds might be like 1 in 20,000, 1 in 2,000,
right.
1 in
Right.
100." Like, sorry, unless it's like, maybe 3, 4 at the most, I'm not even bothering.
Yeah, so that is a big red flag for sure.
I have a good story here. You'll appreciate this, I think. I was laying out a conference brochure for a client, and I really liked working with this woman, and she was really nice. But then, and it came to like, I think it was already like round two, and I was expecting a final approval. And she turned around and she's like, "Oh, we have all new copy."
Ah, yeah,
Talking about like, you need to be marking the changes in the PDF so I can see what's changed. They're like, "Well, no, we just didn't do that. So you'll have to lay out this new copy." And I'm like, "Oh my god," right? And so then she says, "Okay, well, we still have a draft left that's included in the price." Well, technically they did, but that didn't mean like that included a whole rewrite. And so
right.
anyway, I was afraid to really assert myself and say anything, so I just dealt with it. But she actually said to me after that draft, she said, "Okay, well, we have one more draft left, so let me see what revisions I can come up with."
Wow.
Did you just say that? So, so my lesson learned from that, what I started adding to my contracts after that is that instead of saying something includes X number of designs or X number of revisions, I always say up to.
Yep.
Clients picking, like they trying to buy things based on quantity instead of quality, and it's like no.
So here's another lesson learned from a client that I had who kind of similar to what you said. I was doing a brochure and things were going along swimmingly. And I think it was about the third author's alteration, as I called them, the AAs. I get like this email basically saying like, "Oh, we're going to hire a new designer." And I'm thinking, I'm like, "What? Geez, what did I say or do?" I thought this thing was going to press like next week. And what had happened was the organization, the point person, like a new person had come in and just didn't like what I had done with their person and said, like, "This is no good and we're not gonna pay." So she was trying to not pay me, but I had saved all the email communications, that said, "That looks good. Okay, we're going with that. Okay, next steps." Like, there was a running record of the communication that went on.
And the progress, like it was getting done.
I was like, "Whether you wanna print this or not, I don't care, but you better pay me, or I'm gonna take you to small claims court." It was luckily, it was a pretty small job. I think it would wind up being, like, under 2 grand, but still, it was 2 grand, and it was like, there were no red flags, and then all of a sudden, a red flag walked into the office unbeknownst.
And lit itself on fire.
That happened to me pretty early in my career, and I remember it was a huge lesson. I was like, never, ever, ever delete any emails or any communique until after you've gotten paid for that task, because you never know when that line of communication is needed. And I do. I have like, files, most of them are archived because of course you don't want to keep all that stuff around, but I've
I do.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I have all of it archived. I have about
Yeah,
10,
I put it on a disk somewhere else
yeah,
or a
I have like
drive,
10
but
different
yeah,
external drives just with just stuff from 1992 because I'm always
right.
you never know. So I'm sort of a digital hoarder.
No, I do the
But
same thing.
yeah.
I keep all emails,
Mhm.
everything with the job, and then I put it on an external drive. But it's funny that you had that scenario happen because I had something very similar happen and there were no red flags. And it was actually a different contact from a client that I really enjoyed working with. I had tended to underprice things. So not intentionally. And so I actually just thought I did well with the pricing and
Right.
they signed right away. And I thought, this is fantastic, right? And then I go to work on it. I'm really happy with the designs. I send it to her and I say, okay, you know, let's discuss it, and then talk about any changes that might need to be done. But we talked, I think, and then she's like, okay, I'll get back to you. And then next time I heard back from her, she's like, we're going in another direction. I said, okay, well, so we need to have a conversation about this so I can figure out what direction you want to go in. She's like, no, we're going with another designer. I'm like,
Yeah.
going in a different direction and going with a different designer, those are two totally different things.
Right.
I don't know what that was all about, but I was just like, what the heck? Once I had a situation where I was working with a client for many years and everything was like it was pretty copacetic, and I ended up firing them because I was so frustrated because they got this new person in there who became my contact and she just would it's like it's not even like they trusted me that I got them a lot of results, but this woman would just go and talk to the printer without involving me. And at one point, like it started, I found out about this because I went to send the job. It was like a direct mail package. I sent it to the printer and he's like, well, this isn't in reflex blue and black. And I'm like, why the heck would it be in reflex blue and black? Their colors, are, teal and purple. And he's like, "Oh, well, so and so said that we're going to be printing in reflex blue and black because I think it was like $40 cheaper. It was something totally outrageous." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? She never even told me that." And like, why would
Right.
it even be
Right.
coming up, right? So this happened, like, several times, and I was just like, "I can't do this anymore. Like, you're interfering with me getting things done for you, and I just can't." I mean, that's the only person I've ever had do anything like that. That was, like, some weird one-off thing, but whenever I have clients that really have no clue, I'm like, "Let me handle print bids, let me handle print specs, let me handle all of that because it'll make everything much, much easier." You know?
Almost 100% of the time, they're like, "Yay!"
Tried that. I'm like, "I'm gonna deal with all this," and she would get involving herself and messing it up, and I said, "I can't do this anymore."
Yeah, yeah. Well, that one client that I was just telling you about very recently who was very into the minutia, he really wanted to like do some stuff that was kind of, what I would consider old school. I mean, it's not really old school, but I just don't come across it as much anymore because people don't put big budgets into business cards and things like that very much in pocket folders. And so he was like, of course, Googling business cards late one night and he sees foil stamping and embossing and, all these luxurious stocks and stuff. And so then he was saying, I'd like to go in this direction. And he was pretty close to a printer that I know very well, the location. And so I said to him, I kind of used a little bit of reverse psychology on him. I go, awesome. I go, I haven't been able to do that stuff in a while. I go, you go to the printer, tell them to price out foil stamping and embossing and pocket holders. I go, and have them, to look at Classic Crest and look at Mohawk. And I go, I love that stuff. I'm so excited you want to do that. Right? He was like all enthusiastic. He went over to the printer showed him all that stuff, and they gave him the price. And then he goes, I was thinking like, well, like we're gonna dial this back a little. Oh, and this is a funny thing. Someone had handed him a card that was an engraved card, and he really wanted to look into that. And I was like, well, I think like engraving is about $3 a card, So I go, but I applaud you. I love that stuff. When he like looked at the bottom line, he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess we can't really do that now." And I said, "Oh, oh,
I had this one client who was this goes back to one of the things I think I mentioned in the beginning about respect being a big deal for, as good client criteria. And I had this client that it was a large publication and I worked on it every month and I actually worked on it for 10 years.
wow,
But they were well, my contact that was there for a while, she was horrible to work with. She was actually very, like, verbally abusive and disrespectful, and then she'd turn around and praise me to other people, but then, like, she'd be like, "Come on, when is it gonna get done?" After, like, I had recreated, like, a whole 200-page publication, proofread it and laid it out in, like, 2 weeks, and she's like, "The reason they got rid of their previous designer was because they were, like, 2 months behind schedule, but here, I get it done in 2 weeks, and I'm being told to hurry up and get this done, whatever." And it's like, it's not gonna, that was like lightning fast, like, get off my back, right? She didn't treat me well. And I put up with it for the money because I was taking business advice from family and friends that were like, "Oh, but it's a lot of money and you should just keep on with it." And so what I learned from that was, well, first of all, I learned don't take business advice from friends and family. But also, you know, I was so busy with that job and I had other clients too, but I got so busy with work. I didn't do any marketing and I was at the mercy of this big client because they were paying me so much. I should have actually been doing more marketing, even though I had this other work with other clients, because I probably could have gotten rid of that client
right,
sooner than I
yeah,
did. But at some point, I'm just like, look, I'm done.
yeah, yeah." Now, sometimes it takes working with a client, a couple years or several years, and there are times where the personalities just don't mesh. I did have a client like that where I was producing a magazine. It was a quarterly magazine, and me and my first contact got along really, really well. And then he left after a couple years, and a new person came in and we just had no chemistry. There was just not the communication there. And so, but because I had sort of the institutional knowledge and had worked on the project for a number of years and knew the organization. I kind of gutted it out, but I didn't enjoy working with this person. And then finally, there kind of came a point where there was a good break in me being able to gracefully bow out, which is what I did. I just said, I can't really take this project on for, XYZ. And, thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys have been great. And here's two or three other people that would be ideal. And so sometimes that just happens too.
Yeah.
And you can't really like beat yourself up about, oh, well, I, I mean, you just can't work with people that you can't work with, because that just makes for a miserable existence, regardless of the money.
Right, exactly. And I was actually thrilled when this person left, but then the person I was left dealing with, it was like dealing with someone that had amnesia on a daily basis. It was
Yeah,
like, we do this publication every single day. Nothing changes. It's the same process. And I would outline, I gave her like a PDF with checklists. Here's what I need to get done at certain times every single month. And every day it was like the same questions
right.
over and over again. And I'm
Wow.
like, oh, so frustrating. I
Yeah.
mean,
Maybe she had some like short-term memory problem. Oh my god.
And you were talking about, part of your process is discovery. And, I have found that some clients, well, identifying some red flags is kind of easy if it's something like, they're already showing themselves to not follow your process. Like I want people to provide certain information, answer certain questions before I get on a call with them. And I remember and then I send them a link to get on the call. Well, I remember somebody saying to me, they refused to fill out any form with the questions. They didn't want to schedule a link, so they were just like, we're not going to be a good fit. I'm like, thanks. I'm glad we figured that out right now.
Right,
That's fine with me,
right.
right? But then I was talking to this one person from a big organization and she wanted an estimate for a ton of work. And so we got on a call and I told her it was going to be about, probably 20-minute call. And in the middle of the conversation, while I'm asking these questions about the work and why it needed to be done, etc., she's like, who's interviewing who here? None of the other companies asked me any of these questions. And
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, thanks for your time. Bye bye. We
Right.
wouldn't be a good fit. You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you could have said to her, "Well, maybe none of those other companies are as invested in your success as I am."
Yeah, I might have said something like that too, but I was just like, yeah, that's the point. Nobody else is asking these questions. They should be.
Right. Yeah, like we really want to get a very clear understanding about what your goals are before we take on the project so we can give you an accurate, bid. We're not just, giving you a number and then we're going to jack it up, 100% as we get down the road. I mean, this is for everyone's benefit, not just so, yeah. Well, it sounds like you dodged a bullet, Colleen.
Right. She eliminated herself. So I was like,
Yeah.
that's fine. Like, that
Yeah.
was great. But I've also had, I haven't had this happen a lot. And I don't know how many times you've had this happen, but people that are expecting free work. But I've had it happen in two interesting situations. Like this one time, this prospect called and they wanted a logo design and the conversation was going really, really well. And then towards the end, they were like, well, I just want to let you know we are talking to other companies. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I figured that. And he's like, yeah, so after you submit your designs, then we'll decide who we want to work with. And
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, no. You've got this all wrong.
Right, right.
Oh no, you're free to do that, but you're going to still pay for it. You can't ask us to do design work. I said, there's an awful lot involved. It's not sitting down and drawing a picture and saying, here, what do you like?
Yeah,
It's not like I'm cooking up a meal and putting different things on a platter. Here, what do you like? Choose one. It's like, there's like research and stuff, the research that's going on behind the scenes here. If any of this happens. And then I had this other person call me. She was a prospect, nobody I knew. She just called up and she droned on about how educated she was, how many degrees she had, all these things that she had done for the state of Maryland. And I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I gotta go. Like I got things to do, right? So anyway, she kept going on, and then finally she starts talking about how she wanted a book done. And then she says that she had worked with several designers on this book. So I'm like, that's a red flag. And
Uh-oh.
then she was like, but I had to even tell them what fonts to use. And I'm like, that's a red flag too.
Uh-oh.
And then finally, when I was able to get a word in, I mean, because it was ridiculous. When I was finally able to get a word in, I told her, okay, I would send the process is, I would send you an agreement, and then 50% would be required since you're a new client, up front. And she screamed at me on the phone. And she said, I can't believe that you've sat here and wasted my time and you didn't tell me that there was going to be a fee at the beginning of the conversation. I'm like, wait, this woman actually thinks I just wasted her time because she thought I was going to give her work for free because all these other designers had apparently done her wrong. And so I'm supposed to, make up for that.
That's crazy. Yeah, no,
I mean,
I
I
have
was
not
like,
had that because I usually will just say right off the bat, "No, I don't do work, on spec."
I didn't even know that's what she was
Yeah,
expecting. I just thought she was just droning on about these issues she'd had with all these designers. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're just checking yourself off of my list here, but when she actually said that she had expected me to do it for free because of her trouble with these designers, I'm like, you're insane.
right, right. Well,
Like, you're
she
insane.
very well may be insane.
And she kept on yelling. I literally had to hang up with the phone on
Oh
her
my
while she
god.
was yelling. Like, I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I luckily have not had that. I would probably say the thing that happens to me periodically still is I will have friends who will ask me to do something, and so I
Mm.
will say right up front, okay, this is just a quickie one off. I'll give you my friends and family discount, but these are the parameters, like
Right.
if you give me this, and this on this date, I will do this for that, and you have to pay me cash. Like I treat it like a
Right.
under the table sort of like, quickie thing. And that's usually all they're asking me to do. I'm like, I'm not even going to run it through my business. I'm just going to do this quick thing for you. But don't turn it into something where I'm going to regret that.
Right.
And again, I probably do that like once or twice a year. It's like you don't always want to be like, no, you can't. I can't do that unless you pay me. But and usually what they're asking is so inconsequential, it literally does take you, not that much time. And but no, I don't have too many people like that anymore. I
Me neither, thank goodness.
probably, early in my career when
Yeah.
I would do logos, like, and then I would go to show them to people and they wouldn't want to pay, they'd be like, that's great. I think, and take the art because this is even like kind of before, files, like you were actually giving them art and they wouldn't want to pay me. And I'd be thinking
Mm.
like, "Oh, geez, what do I do?" Like, I don't have a, bodyguard to go over there and strong arm 'em, "Hey, I'm gonna take your knee out if you don't give me my payment." But it happened to me a couple times, and so, I definitely learned you've got to get some money up front before you do anything if you
Yeah.
don't know them, and I would say that
And then invoice frequently.
yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing that you've just got to start doing if you're a new designer. And I know, like, when you're in your 20s and you just graduate art school or, graphic design or whatever program that you've been in, and somebody wants you to do something that's really exciting, you're like, yes, I got all these ideas and you
Right.
want to dig right into it. But I just say,
Right.
stop yourself and say, "I need some money."
I need to put my business cap on.
Yeah, I've got to get some money from you first.
But it makes you look like more of a professional too to do that,
Yeah,
as opposed
absolutely.
to not having a contract of some sort in place and then money up front. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think it's also saying, I'm worth it and I'm going to be, like I'm taking this seriously and I want to get paid and
And from the client perspective, you're making an investment. This is something that you're investing in. We're equally wanting to do, a good job and you to be happy at the end of it. And I do think people value things more when they pay for them.
absolutely.
So if you get something for free, you're just generally like, all right.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's got to be, even if it's and like I was just saying about my friends, if they need something quick, I still do make them pay me because I don't want to do free stuff ever.
Mhm.
So, just because it positions the value in their mind. It's not that I need that money. It's like I
Right.
want you to know that there's value in what I'm giving you, so you need to pay me some money for it. So,
Right.
this is for your benefit, not mine.
And you can even give them an right, you can also give them an invoice that
Eh,
shows, like, the full rate of what you would normally charge,
yeah.
and then, like, "Here's what you paid," you
And
know?
I have had, like there was a situation, and this is actually a great story. So, me and my husband, we had our kids were really young, and we had just bought our house, and we literally had no money. Okay, we were just stretched thin, and my daughter wanted to do a theater camp, and she was about 7 or 8, and I knew the couple that ran this organization, and so I emailed the woman who ran it, and I had talked to her at my daughter's school, and I said, listen, I really want my daughter to be able to do this camp this summer, and it was like 600 bucks. And I said, I literally don't have 600 bucks to pay you right now. And I said, is there any way you would ever consider bartering? And I was like, I'm a designer. Is there anything that you would consider bartering so that she could be in this camp and I'll do $600 worth of graphic design work for you? And of course, I figured she would just email me back and be like, "No, thanks," right? But she didn't. She emailed me back and she was like, "Yes, oh my god, we have so many things that you could do that we would love it if you could do that for us." So we did. We set all the parameters out. I did that thing for her, and then we wound up that my daughter wanted to do the camps every year for several months or for several years, and I would just barter with them, and we would always kind of do, this equal exchange. And then, of course, my daughter, who's now in college, graduated out of it, but they still liked me and still wanted me to do their stuff. So now they're a paying client. So there you
Mm.
go. There's a situation where I was trying to make, lemonade out of lemons, and then it turned out to be just a fantastic little client. So sometimes you can figure out different ways to get services if you don't have the money. And I actually have something kind of like that going on right now with somebody who wants some work but doesn't really have the money, and so we're thinking of maybe some creative ways. Again, this is pretty small stuff. I wouldn't do this with like a big web build or something like that.
I once bartered some design work for for meals at my favorite restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think are some good phrases for when you well, clearly if you spot red flags before you've worked with somebody, you can just say, we're not a good fit. But if you're working with a client and they're just a jerk or they're just if they're a jerk, you don't want to refer them,
Right.
to your colleagues because you don't want them to end up with this having the same problems. But sometimes I've just said, you'd be a better fit for so and so, and then it's not someone who was a jerk to work with. It was, maybe it just wasn't a good fit. If somebody wants to art direct, I'm like, I think you need to go check out Fiverr or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are some things that you have said when you have fired a client?
Um, I I don't really have anything different to add. Definitely, this isn't working out, and then I would say for whatever the particular reason is. And I have recommended to people to go to Fiverr, especially people who want logos for free. I'll go.
Hmm.
There's a great place for that, or 99 Designs, which you can get.
Or if they don't want to pay up front.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Or I've recommended people go to Upwork, I'm like, "You can find
Mhm.
designers on Upwork." I'm trying to think though, like with so many so this one particular client that I was telling you about at the very beginning of the podcast and that's ongoing, he actually asked me to do a pretty big web build for him for another thing that he's involved in. And I did tell him, I said, "I that's not my niche. It's an e-commerce thing." And I said, you really should get a company that that's what they specialize in." And so I just kind of steered him in a direction because I knew from the other website that he doesn't follow the schedule. He doesn't follow my process. And he was really good about paying, but he was not being good about paying. And I thought the last thing I want to do is get into a bigger, more intensive e-commerce web build with him, which is going to be a big job. If I had confidence in it, this is we're talking like a $50,000 job. This would be a really great job, but because of those red flags, I don't want to do it. 'Cause it's a
Mhm.
$50,000 job that I wound up spending $100,000 of my life in, if you know what I mean. And I
Mhm.
just thought there's just no way. There'd have to be all kinds of changes in the way that this guy operates for me to even consider it. But he was sitting here in my office, and I said, "This is the kind of place that you want to look for." And I showed him some other companies that specialized more in that sort of thing anyway. And
Mhm.
actually I just had an instance this week where somebody asked me to consider doing their web design, and I said no because again, I'm trying to do a niche and more of a product, and this is outside of it, and I don't want to get into this particular niche. So I'm learning how to for myself, I'm learning how to say no more and more to things that aren't a good fit for me too. So and that's to eliminate the red flags.
And saying no to the work that you don't wanna do is saying yes to other work, other potential work that you do want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, because like you were saying, you open the door to the projects that you really, really are a good fit for. And then your client's happier too, because you have this process that you're putting them through, they're getting the result, and everyone's happy.
Well, this has been great. Thanks for being on the podcast, Evelyn. It's been
Thank
great.
you, Colleen. I loved it. And yeah.
If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Go to creative-boost.com where you can sign up to get notified of new episodes and posts, share on social media, or leave a comment. Thanks so much for listening.